Pope Francis dying just a day after meeting with JD Vance.
When John Oliver drags someone, he doesn't brutally roast them. He sets the stage, lowers the curtain, and gives the entire world front row seats to their public humiliation. His latest target? JD Vance. Last Sunday, Oliver turned that spotlight into a funeral pyre, and the man in the crosshairs was the Vice President of America. First of all, let's get some facts out of the way for context. Pope Francis died at age 88 in the Vatican. He had been sick and hospitalized for some respiratory issues and had developed double pneumonia. His final public appearance came on Easter Sunday, blessing thousands at St. Peter's Square. The next day, he was gone. But here's the interesting part. He met the American VP on Easter Sunday. Now, let's be clear. Pope Francis was a man of faith and humility. JD Vance? Not so much, even though he'd try to tell you differently. So, when JD walked into the Vatican like a disappointing villain from a Dan Brown sequel, the entire Sistine Chapel echoed a sigh. It was almost like watching a raccoon try and discuss physics with Albert Einstein. And hey, if you're enjoying this JD Vance takedown, don't forget to leave a like, remember to subscribe, and maybe even comment your favorite JD quote.
JD Vance, you stay the f*** away from Cardinal Pizza does. You don't meet him, you don't go near him, you don't even think about him.
Anyway, like many, John Oliver couldn't help but ignore the connection. The hilarious night show host opened with that brutal line. And look, is that a little dark? Definitely. But also, kind of fair. Because if the last person you saw was JD Vance, your soul might pack in a bit early too. Imagine your final moments of consciousness being this hipster of a man who sounds like some country club manager explaining microeconomics to a bartender who never asked. In fact, what makes it worse, so much worse, is that the late Pope wasn't only familiar with who JD Vance was, he was also not a fan. It's genuinely incredible how someone as ill-informed as Vance has managed to ruffle the feathers of people as holy as the leader of the Christian community. His pseudo-intellectual justifications of deporting people never sat well with Pope Francis because, believe it or not, Vance tried to use St. Augustine to argue that deporting migrant families was actually theologically sound.
A self-proclaimed baby Catholic, JD Vance is on a quest to reconcile with the Vatican. And what better way to do so than attend one of the most sought-after Catholic events with his wife and children. The one person missing from the Good Friday service was the Pope, who's had to cancel a number of his official appointments since his return home from hospital. Vance has clashed with Pope Francis over the Trump administration's immigration policies, and people familiar with the matter say he's been hoping for a photo op with the pontiff, an opportunity for him to mend the relationship.
It got so bad that the pastoral diplomat, the Pope himself, responded with something that can only be described as the equivalent of a backhand slap with a velvet glove. He wrote a letter to American bishops, condemning the Trump administration for the mass deportation efforts, and then without naming any names, he corrected JD's entire worldview. His exact words were, "Christian love isn't a concentric expansion of interests that little by little extend to other persons and groups." Translation? Shut up, JD, sit down. Stop using religion to justify racism and stop speaking about things you have no knowledge of.
Hours before his passing, Pope Francis met briefly at the Vatican with, of all people, Vice President JD Vance.
So good to see you. I know you've not been feeling great, but it's good to see you in better health.
Thank you very much for your visit.
Of course. And thank you for seeing me.
Oh man, what a way to go, huh? I mean, Holy Father, do you have any last wishes? Well, not this. Shortly after his visit, Vance tweeted, "Today I met with the Holy Father, Pope Francis. I am grateful for his invitation to meet, and I pray for his good health. Happy Easter." So now we know JD Vance is bad at praying, too.
While John took Vance apart, piece by piece, other talk show hosts also joined in. Jimmy Kimmel pointed out how Vance was bad even at praying because he'd posted on X that he was going to pray for Pope Francis's better health hours before his passing. At the same time, thousands of users on social media couldn't help but notice the haunting coincidence, if you can call it that, and of Vance bringing death and misery wherever he went. Because after meeting the Pope, JD's next destination was India, of all places. He posted a nice family picture in front of the Taj Mahal, and hours later, northern India was the target of a terrorist attack. and now there could be a war breaking out on the Pakistan-India border. All we're saying is, John Oliver's not wrong. Vance might need to be locked up, for all our sakes. As he continued his roast session, Oliver pivoted to another absurd observation. He talked about how the Vatican would soon have to choose a new pope, and he couldn't possibly ignore who was on the shortlist as one of the candidates. Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa. No, this is not a made-up name from the J.K. Rowling's racist Harry Potter world. This is a real name. A real-life Vatican official who sounds a lot like a deleted Mario Kart character. Funnily enough, that name literally translates to pizza dance. And again, this isn't a joke. It wouldn't be out of place in a Disney Channel movie set in Rome. So, like any other good comedian, John wasn't going to pass up the opportunity to make the most out of a hilarious situation. First, he took a few swings at the name and the mock seriousness of it all. Then he brought out a warning, or almost a plea. He practically begged Vance to stay the hell away from Cardinal Pizza Dance. It was a line in the sand from Oliver, almost like the spiritual version of putting up garlic to keep the politics out. Nobody wants another pope dying so soon. It's a cosmic warning. Vance needs to stay away from the Vatican. Hell, all of Italy, maybe the entire world. Because why risk it? Oliver made sure he turned a papal transition into a restraining order. Plus, there's enough misery in the world as it is. Nobody needs the sheer exposure of JD's smug era to make things worse. That man belongs in the universe where The Last of Us takes place. And no, not as a survivor, but as a cordyceps. He simply shouldn't be allowed near delicate ecosystems, holy men, or humans in general. More importantly, let's not forget the symbolism here. In a world teetering between collapse and crisis, it's crucial to give people a bit of hope, humor, and a pope with a name straight out of a Nickelodeon-themed dance party. Not because he's the best choice, far from it, but because the name brings some joy. And JD Vance? He's the opposite of that. So yes, please practice your restraint, Mr. Vice President, and don't book any flights to Rome. Just stay away. Let the world have a well-deserved, whimsical, pizza-themed pope in peace.
Ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on two principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us.
But the Pope thing isn't the only goal scored by the Vice President recently. You see, Vance has gotten to the top by saying the wrong things, standing up for the wrong causes, and being just peak cringe. Well, lately he crossed all diplomatic lines. You thought bullying the president of a war-torn state was bad? Vance said, "Hold my beer and watch this."
Make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity.
This is not AI, this is JD saying those words. In public, with cameras rolling, in the year 2025? Is there like no sensitivity and PR training at the White House? Even the Vatican caught up with the latest trends in culture under Pope Francis. But apparently, the White House is still stuck in the early 1800s.
I know it is hard to take from someone with this accent, but you are really not supposed to use the word peasants anymore. That is incredibly insulting, especially coming from the man who, remember, is next in line to run the country if anything were to happen to Elon Musk. So it is...
Forget John Oliver. No one was going to let Vance get away with that. Eyes wide, mouth agape. John wasn't being offensive, and he would have been right to be offensive given the situation. He explained how Vance was on a suicide mission, except he was taking down his own country by being unnecessarily rude.
He's really calling Chinese people peasants. Nobody likes to be called a peasant. Even legit peasants are like, actually, I consider myself more of an agricultural entrepreneur.
Tonight, we are seeing China trading insults with the Vice President, JD Vance, and the latest knock against President Trump's trade war.
让美国那些乡巴佬们在中华民族5000年文明面前去哀鸣吧。
Even Ronnie Chiang of The Daily Show joined in. And he's not wrong. The world barely survived the Kendrick Drake spat. We don't want another one, especially with the global economy on the line.
中方对中美经贸关系的立场已经讲得很清楚了。听到这位副总统说出这样无知又缺乏礼貌的话，令人诧异，也感到悲哀。
As expected, that comment hasn't gone down well in China. They've vowed to fight the US on this front and make sure they take the battle to the very end. John Oliver was right to call Vance the most reckless person involved in all this because the Chinese don't even want to give JD a name. So, from offending global allies, misusing sacred religious diplomacy and religion, to hovering around the Pope like a sheen version of a Da Vinci Code villain, JD Vance is fast losing his status as a statesman and becoming a cautionary tale in loafers. And John Oliver's warning to Vance is very clear. We've already lost one Pope. The global economy is on the verge of a collapse, so please do us all a favor and touch some grass in Ohio. On behalf of all humanity, please, JD, keep your distance from Papa Pizza Dance and any other Pope in waiting. And also, maybe just stop talking. Altogether, it might do wonders. With that, the curtain falls on yet another episode of What Global Catastrophic Event Has JD Vance Caused Now? Remember, this man isn't a political figure, he's an embarrassment. And if you enjoyed John Oliver ripping into him, then you'll love our other video where Bill Maher joins the party and calls out Vance in his own brutal way.